it's like pounding inside of her, and I'm like, what are we doing? Book talk has very much been impacting the publishing industry and has also kind of determined what kind of books are being published. And there's one particular evolution that it just doesn't sit well with me. And I kind of wanted to discuss it in this video and have like an open dialogue with y'all in the comments, because I'm not really going to have an answer by the end of this video. This is also very much off the cuff, so if I'm not articulating myself very well, that's why. My particular issue is with smut in books, so let's get into it. But first though, hi, my name is Anneleen. I make bookish content as much as I can. I'm not going to say every week because I have a full-time job, but I make bookish content, and if this video is something that you like and you want to see more, I would love it if you subscribed. But let's get into it. So I was going through my local bookshop, looking at the bookshelves and the tables, and basically looking at the covers that we have nowadays. And I came to the conclusion that there are two types of book covers that we have nowadays. Either it's the cartoon romance covers that indicate that this is a rom-com, it has cartoon depictions of people, so never is it going to be a real person. And the titles are often snazzy, witty, sort of a pun of some sort, and have like a vibrant background 9 times out of 10. On the other hand, you have the fantasy covers that very much emulate the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, both in the title as well as the cover design. A lot of these titles are blank of blank and blank, so like a kingdom of rust and roses, or a girl of wit and, I don't know, love. They're always these 3-parter titles, and a lot of the times the book covers are the titles, like it's just the title in very large font with some fantasy elements sprinkled throughout the cover to indicate that this is a fantasy. Now, my problem is not necessarily with these covers, because that is just how the publishing industry works. Once you know that something works because you saw it being a huge success for someone else, you will start to copy it. That is just how things are. That is how trends begin. We just are in this cartoon slash blank of blank and blank era. Like, that is just what covers are nowadays, and that's not really something that I am bothered by. That's just how the publishing industry works. However, my issue is, if you were to take these two books, like let's take these two romance covers as an example, you put them side by side, from like an aesthetics perspective, these two books seem pretty similar because they're cartoon covers. They indicate that they're rom-coms. Like, the setup of the cover is pretty similar, so you would think, okay, these are 2 rom-coms, sure. But if you were to examine the contents of these books a bit more closely, you will know that the book on the right is a young adult rom-com and has basically no smut or no sex. Like, it's very clean, very minimal, very demure.
Very demure, very mindful. I don't come to work with a green cut crease.
No, but like, seriously, it's like a young adult romance, and the book on the left is a mature book. Like, it has smut, it has sex, it is pretty explicit, and there's no way of telling if you were to just look at the covers. And that is kind of the point that I'm trying to make. Because books nowadays all look pretty much the same, there is no way of determining whether it is targeting a young adult audience or a mature audience. And because all of the books look pretty much the same, it is very much possible for like a 13, 14-year-old to walk into a bookshop, see a cute romance cover, pick it up, read it, and then read very explicit sex scenes. And please, like, don't interpret this as me being super conservative, because I think the evolution of like smut and spice in books that are targeting women is a fantastic evolution. For the longest time, we as women were shamed for having any sort of sexual pleasure. Female sexual pleasure was considered taboo, and we were not allowed to be enjoying sex. So the fact that the publishing industry has kind of like shifted that conversation by implementing smut and by adding more spice to books, that is such a positive evolution. So I'm not like making that a bad thing with this video. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm more so a bit concerned that because the lines between young adult and adult, or like new adult, or whatever you want to call it, have been kind of blurred recently, young boys and girls will be reading books with maybe a very warped representation of what sexuality and sex is, because as much as there are books with great representation of sex, there's also a lot of books nowadays that show sex in a very disturbing or romanticized way that is just not realistic. There are also a lot of like romance and romantasy books on the market right now with just kind of problematic relationship dynamics. Those kinds of like romantasy books and stuff are kind of meant for an older audience. Like they're not meant for young adults. They're meant for people from like the age of 23 and older. You kind of know that those are unhealthy relationships. That is kind of the part of the enjoyment. Like it's sort of this fantasy that you're portraying. But if you're younger, like if you're in the YA demographic, your brain is still very malleable and you might think that that is the way to go when in reality it is not. I think one of the reasons why the lines between like young adult and romantasy slash new adult books blurred is because for the longest time, I think in the last 5 years, there was this gap in literature where especially young women were very much interested in young adult books because these books a lot of the time had very strong female main characters, which is something that was quite lacking in literature. And they kept on reading young adult just to be able to have that sort of storyline, despite not really fitting into that age category anymore, because typically I think the definition of young adult books is between like 12 and 18. Young women kept reading YA just to have young female characters with interesting storylines that you could not find anywhere else. And that is why in the publishing industry this new genre of romantasy was created, because that kind of filled that space of young adult books with the same kind of storylines, but just for an all older audience that also had like more mature subjects. So it's very normal that the covers of YA and romantasy or like rom-coms look very similar. It's because it is kind of a very natural evolution of YA. So again, it's not really a problem with the publishing industry because they're just doing what is appealing to a young female audience. I more so specifically mean that because all of these books look very similar, there's no way to determine from like a aesthetics perspective whether that book is appropriate for like a younger audience or not. I'm not even talking about just primarily sex. It could also just be very triggering content like rape or assault or all those kinds of things, except if you were to like look it up, but that is already like an extra step that you as a consumer have to take, and I don't think everyone is going to be doing that. In addition to that too, as a consumer, if you were to walk through a bookshop or you're going through like a web shop, all of these books, whether it's YA or like mature rom-coms and romantasy, they're all kind of piled together because just like we as a consumer, the retailers don't really know what is mature and what is not. If you look on Amazon in like the YA section, you will see a lot of books in there that are not really young adult, like they're very spicy and they should not be in that list. Like it is not really appropriate to be reading as a young adult. The retailers don't really know where to put certain books because they all look the same. They all look like young adult or as romantasy, so they're kind of all over the place. Now, all of the publishing industries across the world have a particular coding system that they use to kind of indicate towards the retailers or the bookshops what the contents are of the books that they're publishing. Like there are particular codes that you can give to a coloring book, and that way the retailer knows, oh, I need to put that book onto the coloring book shelf. The same goes for fiction. It even indicates what ages are appropriate for that book, or if it's a nonfiction or a fiction book. Like every single country has some sort of system in place. Some countries do require to put like the code into the book or onto the book, but they're kind of become negligible. Like not a lot of bookshops or retailers follow those rules very strictly, because otherwise all of the book talk shelves and tables would not exist, because they would all be separated according to their age and their demographic. So yeah, I don't really know how to go from here. Like I don't even know if the issue that I'm raising is actually an issue. Maybe it's just a non-issue and y'all are like, you just have to shut up and be happy that there's smut in the world. But like it doesn't really sit right with me that the lines between young adult and adult content are so blurred. When I was growing up and reading young adult, a lot of the books that had sex scenes, because it was present, like it's not that there is no sex in young adult books, but they were a lot of times closed doors, or it was like one particular sex scene that was very sweet and very appropriate for the age group. That is something I don't see anymore in young adult books, but it's also because the lines have become so blurred that there's no real indicator anymore to find proper young adult books. And now it's just like, if I see a sex scene in what I think is a young adult book, because I cannot tell the difference, it's like pounding inside of her, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, just, yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this rant, and maybe we can have like a fun, interesting conversation in the comments. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. See you next time.